At approximately 0500 hours on May 5, 1945, Private First Class Desmond Doss of the 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Infantry Division, United States Army, climbed a cargo net up a 400-foot escarpment on the island of Okinawa. He was 26 years old. He carried no rifle, he carried no pistol, he carried no grenades. He carried a medical aid bag containing bandages, plasma, morphine, and sulfanilamide powder. He was a combat medic and a conscientious objector who had refused on religious grounds to carry a weapon or to train with weapons. The escarpment, known to American forces as Hacksaw Ridge, was a sheer rock cliff that rose from relatively flat terrain to a plateau above. Japanese forces held the plateau in heavily fortified positions. The 307th Infantry had attempted to capture the plateau the previous day, May 4th, and had been repelled with severe casualties. American wounded remained on the plateau, unable to be evacuated due to intense enemy fire. Over the next 12 hours, Doss would move across the plateau under constant enemy fire, treating wounded soldiers, dragging them to the edge of the escarpment, and lowering them one by one down the cliff face using a rope litter system he devised. He would do this alone, without assistance, while Japanese soldiers fired at him, threw grenades at him, and attempted to kill him repeatedly. By nightfall, on May 5, 1945, Doss had lowered 75 wounded soldiers down the escarpment to safety. The exact number has been disputed. Doss initially estimated 50 men. Other witnesses estimated 100 or more. The Army officially recognized 75 as the verified count based on medical evacuation records from that day. The action would earn him the Medal of Honor and make him the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the nation's highest military decoration for combat valor. He would accomplish this without ever carrying a weapon. This is what happened. Desmond Thomas Doss was born on February 7, 1919, in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was the second of 3 children born to William Thomas Doss, a carpenter, and Bertha Edward Doss, a homemaker. The family was poor. William Doss worked irregularly due to alcoholism and health problems. The family often relied on Bertha Doss's work as a shoemaker to meet expenses. The Doss family were Seventh-day Adventists, members of a Protestant denomination that observes Saturday as the Sabbath and adheres to specific interpretations of biblical teaching, including a commitment to nonviolence. Adventist doctrine, as taught in the church that the Doss family attended, held that the 10 Commandments were to be followed literally, including the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." Doss attended school through 10th grade in Lynchburg. He left school at age 16 to work and help support his family. He worked at a lumber mill, then at a shipyard in Newport News, Virginia. He was working at the shipyard on December 7, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. After the United States entered World War II, Doss received a draft deferment because his work at the shipyard was classified as essential to the war effort. He could have legally avoided military service entirely. He chose not to. Doss later stated that he believed he had a duty to serve his country, but that his religious convictions would not allow him to kill. Doss reported for induction into the Army on April 1, 1942. On his induction paperwork, in the section requesting military specialty preference, he wrote medic. When asked during processing whether he would bear arms, he stated, "No, I am a conscientious objector." The classification of conscientious objector in 1942 was complex. The Selective Service Act recognized conscientious objection, but primarily for members of historically pacifist churches, such as Quakers, Mennonites, and Brethren. Seventh-day Adventists were not universally recognized as pacifist. Many Adventists served in combat roles. Doss's claim to conscientious objector status was initially challenged. Doss was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for basic training in April 1942. He was assigned to the medical detachment of an infantry company. His refusal to carry a weapon created immediate problems. Army regulations required all soldiers, including medics, to qualify with the M1 Garand rifle. Doss refused. His company commander attempted to force compliance. Doss was assigned extra duty. He was harassed by other soldiers in his unit who considered him a coward. He was denied leave. His superiors attempted to have him discharged from the Army as unsuitable for military service. Doss refused to accept discharge. He stated he wanted to serve as a medic but would not compromise his religious beliefs. In June 1942, Doss's case was reviewed by higher headquarters. His conscientious objector status was officially recognized under the classification 1AO, meaning he was available for military service but restricted to non-combatant roles. He was allowed to continue as a medic without weapons training. Doss completed medic training at Fort Jackson and was assigned to Company B, 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Infantry Division. The 77th Division was a regular Army division activated in 1942 for service in World War II. The division trained at Fort Jackson through 1942 and 1943. During training, Doss's relationship with his company improved gradually. He proved himself competent as a medic. He was physically fit and capable. He volunteered for difficult assignments. His religious convictions also led him to refuse to work or train on Saturdays, the Adventist Sabbath, which created additional friction, but he would work extra hours on other days to compensate. In March 1944, the 77th Division was deployed to the Pacific Theater. The division arrived in Hawaii in March 1944 and conducted additional training for jungle warfare. In July 1944, the division participated in the invasion of Guam. Doss was with Company B during the Guam operation. During the Guam campaign, Doss treated wounded soldiers under fire for the first time. His performance was noted by his officers. He received no decorations from the Guam operation, but was recognized in his unit as a competent and brave medic. In November 1944, the 77th Division participated in the invasion of Leyte in the Philippines. Doss again served as a medic during the Leyte campaign. On December 28, 1944, during fighting near Ormoc on Leyte, Doss was treating wounded soldiers when his position came under mortar fire. He continued treating casualties despite the fire and was credited with saving multiple lives. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal with V device for valor for his actions on Leyte. By April 1945, Doss had been in combat for 9 months. He had participated in 2 major campaigns. He had proven his courage repeatedly. His status as a conscientious objector was no longer questioned by the soldiers in his company. They knew he would come for them if they were wounded. The 77th Infantry Division landed on Okinawa on April 16, 1945, as part of the invasion force for Operation Iceberg, the Battle for Okinawa. Okinawa was 350 miles from the Japanese home islands and was considered essential for the planned invasion of Japan. The island was heavily defended by approximately 100,000 Japanese soldiers of the 32nd Army. The 77th Division's initial objective was the Aishima, a small island off Okinawa's coast. The division secured Aishima by April 21st, then moved to the main island. By late April, the division was committed to the southern front, where Japanese defenses were strongest. The Japanese defensive strategy on Okinawa relied on a series of fortified ridgelines and escarpments that crossed the island. These natural obstacles were turned into fortresses with caves, tunnels, bunkers, and interlocking fields of fire. The Maida Escarpment, which American forces called Hacksaw Ridge, was one of these defensive positions. The Maida Escarpment was approximately 400 feet high, running roughly east to west across the island. The escarpment's northern face was nearly vertical in most places. The plateau above the escarpment was approximately 300 yards deep before the terrain descended to the south. Japanese forces had fortified the plateau with extensive cave systems, bunkers, and fighting positions. Artillery and mortar positions on reverse slopes could fire on the plateau without being visible from American positions below. The 307th Infantry Regiment was assigned to capture the Maida Escarpment on April 29, 1945. The attack failed with heavy casualties. The regiment tried again on April 30th. That attack also failed. The regiment tried again on May 1st, May 2nd, and May 3rd. Each time, American forces reached the top of the escarpment, established a foothold, and were driven back by Japanese counterattacks. Casualties were severe. On May 4th, 1945, the 307th Infantry Regiment made another attempt. Company B, Doss's company, was part of the assault force. Soldiers climbed the escarpment using cargo nets and rope ladders that engineers had attached to the cliff face. The climb was slow and exposed. Japanese soldiers fired down on the climbing Americans. Company B reached the top of the escarpment at approximately 0800 hours. The company established defensive positions on the plateau. Japanese positions were located approximately 50 to 100 yards from the American perimeter. Fighting was intense. Japanese soldiers launched attacks from caves and bunkers. American soldiers advanced yard by yard, using grenades and flamethrowers to clear positions. By 1400 hours on May 4th, Company B had sustained heavy casualties. Approximately 40% of the company was killed or wounded. Ammunition was running low. The company commander requested permission to withdraw. Permission was granted. The withdrawal presented a problem. Wounded soldiers could not climb down the cargo nets. They required evacuation by litter. But enemy fire made litter evacuation impossible. The company commander made the decision to leave the wounded on the plateau temporarily, withdraw the mobile soldiers, and return later to evacuate casualties. Doss refused to leave. He informed his company commander that he would remain on the plateau with the wounded until they could be evacuated. His company commander ordered him to withdraw. Doss respectfully declined the order. The company commander, recognizing that Doss would not obey, withdrew the company and left Doss with the wounded. Approximately 75 wounded soldiers from Company B and other units remained on the plateau as night fell on May 4th. Some could move, most could not. Japanese soldiers controlled most of the plateau. The wounded Americans were scattered across an area approximately 200 yards wide. Doss spent the night of May 4th moving among the wounded. He had limited supplies. His aid bag had been depleted during the day's fighting. He used bandages from dead soldiers. He gave his last morphine syrettes to the most severely wounded. He dragged soldiers who were exposed to fire into shell craters or behind rocks where they had some protection. At first light on May 5th, approximately 0500 hours, Doss assessed the situation. The wounded needed evacuation. The only evacuation route was down the escarpment. The cargo nets were not suitable for lowering wounded soldiers. A different system was required. Doss located rope that had been used to haul supplies up the escarpment. He tied the rope around a tree stump near the edge of the cliff. He fashioned a litter using 2 rifles, which he took from dead soldiers, as poles, with a poncho stretched between them. He placed a wounded soldier on the litter, tied the rope to the litter, and began lowering the soldier down the cliff face, using the tree stump as an anchor point and controlling the descent by feeding rope around his body. The first descent took approximately 10 minutes. The soldier reached the bottom safely. Medical personnel at the base of the escarpment received the wounded man. Doss pulled the rope and litter back up. Doss repeated this process. He would move across the plateau, locate a wounded soldier, drag or carry the soldier to the edge of the escarpment, load the soldier onto the litter, and lower him down. Each evacuation took between 10 and 20 minutes, depending on the soldier's location and the difficulty of movement. Japanese soldiers fired at Doss repeatedly during these movements. The plateau was not secured. Enemy soldiers occupied positions within 50 yards of where Doss was working. Rifle fire and machine gun fire hit near him throughout the day. Grenades were thrown at him. He was not hit during the initial hours of May 5th through a combination of the broken terrain, providing some cover, and what witnesses later described as extraordinary luck. Doss prayed before each evacuation. He was observed by soldiers at the base of the escarpment to pause at the cliff edge, bow his head briefly, then begin lowering the litter. He later stated that he prayed the same prayer each time, asking God to help him save one more. At approximately 1100 hours, a Japanese grenade exploded near Doss. Shrapnel hit his legs. He ignored the wounds and continued working. At approximately 1300 hours, another grenade exploded closer, striking him in the arm and back. He treated his own wounds with bandages, then continued evacuating soldiers. The rope litter system worked, but was slow. Each evacuation required Doss to pull the empty litter back up the cliff, a physically demanding task after hours of work. His hands were torn and bleeding from the rope friction. His uniform was covered with blood from his own wounds and from the wounded soldiers he had carried. At approximately 1500 hours, American artillery began firing on Japanese positions on the plateau. The artillery was called in by forward observers who had moved back to the top of the escarpment. The artillery fire forced Japanese soldiers to take cover in their bunkers and caves, which reduced the enemy fire directed at Doss. He used this period to evacuate as many wounded as possible. By 1800 hours, as darkness approached, Doss had evacuated approximately 75 wounded soldiers. The exact count was not made by Doss. The count was reconstructed after the action by comparing the number of casualties from Company B and other units who were evacuated from the base of the escarpment on May 5th with the number who had been left on the plateau the previous evening. Doss himself estimated that he evacuated about 50 men. He stated he lost count after the first 30 or 40. Other soldiers who observed his actions from the base of the escarpment estimated higher numbers, some claiming 100 or more. Medical records from the 307th Infantry Regiment show that 75 soldiers were evacuated from the base of Hacksaw Ridge on May 5th, all of whom were lowered down the escarpment by rope. The Army accepted 75 as the verified number. After dark on May 5th, Doss descended the escarpment himself. He was exhausted. His hands were severely injured. He had shrapnel wounds to his legs, arms, and back. He reported to the battalion aid station. He was treated for his wounds and told to rest. He refused evacuation to a field hospital. On May 6th, Company B returned to the top of the escarpment as part of a renewed assault. Doss climbed back up with them. He continued serving as the company medic despite his injuries. Over the next 16 days, from May 6th to May 21st, the 307th Infantry Regiment fought continuously for control of the Maida escarpment and surrounding terrain. Doss treated casualties throughout this period. On May 21st, 1945, Doss was severely wounded. He was treating a wounded soldier when artillery fire struck his position. A shell fragment hit Doss in the left arm, shattering the bones between his elbow and shoulder. A second fragment struck his left leg. A third struck his chest, cracking ribs but not penetrating his torso. Doss's left arm was nearly severed. He applied a tourniquet to his own arm, using his right hand and his teeth. He waited 5 hours for evacuation because other wounded soldiers had priority. During those 5 hours, while lying wounded, Doss gave his aid bag and supplies to another medic who was treating casualties nearby. Doss was evacuated to a field hospital on May 21st. His left arm could not be saved. Surgeons removed bone fragments and attempted to preserve as much of the arm as possible, but the damage was too extensive. Multiple surgeries were required. Doss spent more than 5 months in military hospitals in the Pacific before being transported to the United States. Doss arrived at a military hospital in the United States in November 1945. He underwent additional surgeries to his arm. During one of these procedures, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. The tuberculosis had gone undetected earlier and was now in an advanced stage. Doctors informed Doss that he had likely contracted tuberculosis while recovering in hospitals in the Pacific, where sanitation was poor and infectious diseases were common. Treatment for tuberculosis in 1945 required long-term hospitalization and surgery. Doss had a lung removed and 5 ribs removed. He remained hospitalized for tuberculosis treatment until 1946. The tuberculosis treatment, combined with his combat wounds, left him disabled. He weighed less than 100 pounds when he was discharged from the hospital. Doss was medically discharged from the Army in 1946 with the rank of corporal. He had been promoted from private first class during his hospitalization. He received a 100% disability rating from the Veterans Administration due to his wounds, his missing arm function, and his tuberculosis. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor was submitted by Doss's battalion commander in May 1945, shortly after the action on May 5th. The recommendation was supported by sworn statements from more than 50 witnesses, including soldiers Doss had rescued, soldiers who had observed his actions from the base of the escarpment, and officers who had witnessed his repeated exposure to enemy fire. The Medal of Honor was approved in August 1945. President Harry S. Truman presented the Medal of Honor to Corporal Desmond Doss at a ceremony at the White House on October 12, 1945. Doss was still recovering from his wounds. He wore his Army uniform with his left arm in a sling. 14 other soldiers received the Medal of Honor at the same ceremony. President Truman, after placing the medal around Doss's neck, shook his hand and stated, "I am proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." The ceremony was covered extensively by newspapers and newsreels. Doss became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor for actions in combat. After his discharge, Doss returned to Lynchburg, Virginia. He married Dorothy Schutte in August 1942, before deploying overseas. They had one son, Desmond Jr., born in 1946. The family lived on a small farm near Lynchburg that was purchased with donated funds from members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Doss's health remained poor for the rest of his life. The tuberculosis recurred multiple times, requiring additional hospitalizations. His combat wounds caused chronic pain. He had limited use of his left arm. He was deaf in one ear due to an injury sustained in combat. He required antibiotics for years to suppress the tuberculosis, and the medication caused hearing loss in his other ear, eventually leaving him completely deaf. Despite his health problems, Doss remained active in his church and his community. He worked part-time as a carpenter when his health allowed. He spoke at schools and churches about his experiences, emphasizing his religious beliefs and his conviction that one could serve one's country without compromising one's faith. Dorothy Doss died in November 1991 in an automobile accident. Desmond was driving the car when the accident occurred, though the accident was determined to be caused by another driver. Dorothy's death devastated him. He remarried in 1993 to Frances Dean, who had also lost her spouse. In the 1990s and 2000s, Doss's story received renewed attention. He was featured in documentaries, books, and articles about World War II conscientious objectors and Medal of Honor recipients. He received numerous honors, including induction into the United States Army Medical Department Hall of Fame in 1989. In 2004, a statue of Doss was dedicated at the National Museum of Patriotism in Atlanta, Georgia. The statue depicts him kneeling in prayer while holding a wounded soldier. Doss attended the dedication ceremony, despite being in poor health and requiring a wheelchair. Desmond Doss died on March 23, 2006, at his home in Piedmont, Alabama, where he had moved to be closer to family. He was 87 years old. The cause of death was complications from respiratory failure related to his tuberculosis. He was buried with full military honors at the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, Tennessee. His funeral was attended by more than 1,500 people, including representatives from the Department of Defense, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and numerous veterans organizations. An honor guard from the 77th Infantry Division Association participated in the ceremony. In 2016, 10 years after Doss's death, a major motion picture about his life was released. The film, based on documented accounts of his actions at Hacksaw Ridge, brought his story to a much wider audience. The film was commercially successful and critically acclaimed. Doss's Medal of Honor is held by his family. His uniform and personal items are displayed at the Desmond Doss Museum at the Southern Adventist University in Tennessee. The museum, opened in 2006, shortly before his death, was created to preserve his legacy and educate visitors about conscientious objection and military service. The 77th Infantry Division Association maintains a memorial to Doss at their annual reunions. A section of highway near Lynchburg, Virginia, is designated the Desmond T. Doss Memorial Highway. The Desmond T. Doss Health Clinic, operated by the Adventist Church in Lynchburg, is named in his honor. Doss's Medal of Honor citation reads, "He was a company aidman when the 1st Battalion assaulted a jagged escarpment 400 feet high. As our troops gained the summit, a heavy concentration of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire crashed into them, inflicting approximately 75 casualties and driving the others back. Private First Class Doss refused to seek cover and remained in the fire-swept area with the many stricken, carrying them one by one to the edge of the escarpment and there lowering them on a rope-supported litter down the face of a cliff to friendly hands." The citation continues, "On May 2nd, he exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire in rescuing a wounded man 200 yards forward of the lines on the same escarpment. And 2 days later, he treated 4 men who had been cut down while assaulting a strongly defended cave, advancing through a shower of grenades to within 8 yards of enemy forces in a cave's mouth, where he dressed his comrades' wounds before making 4 separate trips under fire to evacuate them to safety." The citation describes additional actions on May 5th and his final wounding on May 21st. The full citation runs more than 400 words, one of the longest Medal of Honor citations on record, because the Army documented multiple separate actions over 3 weeks rather than a single engagement. The action on May 5, 1945, was not an isolated event. It was the most dramatic of multiple occasions when Doss exposed himself to enemy fire to save wounded soldiers. Medical records and witness statements document that over the course of the Okinawa campaign, Doss personally treated and evacuated more than 200 wounded soldiers. What distinguished the May 5th action was that he did it alone, without support, using a system he improvised over a 12-hour period while wounded himself. The 75 men he lowered down Hacksaw Ridge represented only a portion of the total lives he saved, but they were saved under circumstances that should have resulted in his own death. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. We are committed to telling the documented stories of Medal of Honor recipients, more than 3,500 stories spanning more than 150 years of American military history. Each story deserves to be told with precision and respect. Each recipient deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below. Share where you are watching from. If you have a connection to the 77th Infantry Division, to Seventh-day Adventism, to conscientious objectors who served in the military, or to Okinawa veterans, share it with us. Many of you are veterans. Some of you are active duty. Some are family members of those who served. Some are people of faith who want to understand how religious conviction and military service can coexist. On May 5, 1945, 75 wounded soldiers were lowered down a cliff face at Hacksaw Ridge on Okinawa. Each one was carried to safety by a man who refused to carry a weapon, who was called a coward during training, who prayed before each evacuation, asking God to help him save one more. Desmond Doss proved that courage has many forms, and that saving lives requires as much bravery as taking them. The facts speak for themselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering.